Hey everybody, this is Matt on a beautiful fall day. It's really gorgeous out here, and I love the fall. I'm currently building a podcast. I'm scripting it out, and I'm looking forward to publishing it. Hopefully in 2019 it should be done sometime. It could even be like November or December of 2019 before everything is done. And along the way, I think I'm going to toss out topics that come up as I process all of these episodes and what I want to say. Some of them are easily digestible. I can just kind of toss into the ring for your amusement and consideration. One of the things that comes up quite a bit in metaphysical communities and in enlightenment, everything from New Age and Buddhism to psychology and neuroscience is kind of playing with this idea that the self does not exist. Matt, this thing here doesn't exist. Insert your name here. Does not exist. You don't exist, right? It's a delusion. It's all a trick of the light. It's all shadows and mirrors and fog and the big fancy CGI kind of thing going on. I wanted to address that. Whenever you say it doesn't exist, it doesn't matter what it is. Once you acknowledge it, then you acknowledge it. It's a thing. Let me give you an example that it's really simple and easy to kind of play with. The color blue. The color blue can be argued is a delusion, right? Because really it's your brain's way of organizing a perception. You're organizing a perception of a certain wavelength of light. A photon is traveling with a certain wavelength as it goes, and your eye and brain together kind of create this experience of blue. The thing blue beyond your perception does not exist, right? The sky is not inherently blue, it's what you're seeing, and so on. This shirt or this chair, right? Blue, not a thing. Doesn't matter if it's your favorite color, it doesn't exist, right? And we can, if you imagine somebody in a really strict way kind of like challenging you about this, they might say, oh, I bet your ego's too attached to the experience of blue. You can't really accept. You can't let go of blue, right? Because it's really a delusion. It's really just a trick of the mind. It doesn't really exist. This blue thing that you're so attached to, and you just got to get over yourself, right? You see how absurd it all sounds? Because we all acknowledge blue does exist in some way. In a way that's weird and fun to think about, maybe, but it exists. There's poetry with blue. There's science where things are color-coded, and blue paint in a room has an effect on the mind, right? Blue clothing has an effect. People like the color blue or dislike the color blue. The color blue is as real as any other memory or thought in your brain. Right? And this is kind of what I want to get to. When people talk about self, Matt, can you experience this concept of self, this Matt thing, for example, or whatever your name is, right? Can you experience that the same way? And I think at heart, a lot of people in the metaphysical communities who are challenging us to consider the non-existence of self are really trying to get at it that way. They're really trying to convey, hey, it isn't what you think it is, right? This blue thing is a perception. The sky isn't actually blue. It's a perception. Your brain tells you it's blue. Likewise, this Matt thing is a momentary, fleeting sort of experience in this lifetime. But don't get attached to it as a structure of a permanent thing, right? And that can be really hard to tease out. When we start talking about that, it gets really kind of weird and abstract. And so that's why people kind of just default to like, well, nothingness, right? You know, existence is nothingness, and there is no self, and you have no identity, and all that. Because it's simple. It's simpler to do that than to try to tease out this, well, self is kind of like the color blue or red or any other color, right? It's a perception, and so on. The same is true of sound, right? There is no such thing as a G note, right? Or A, B, C, D, right? These notes don't exist. There's just percussion of air. It's only your brain that organizes tone and creates some kind of musical experience about it. It's pretty cool when you go into, by the way, if you research at all how the brain takes things in and learns how to process these different things, and then creates a familiarity and a tapestry for it. It gives it a place and a way to perceive and experience it in a familiar and kind of regular way. You know, notice you don't have to wonder what music is every time you hear music, because you recognize it's music, even if it's a different genre, even if it's a different sound altogether, different instruments, different. Nobody has to tell you that's music. Isn't that weird when you think about it? You know it is. There's something about the brain that enables us to experience things as familiar and real. And that continuity of experience and the way that it does that is really kind of fascinating to me. So when you think about Matt, or whatever your name is, right? You think about who you are and the name that you have and the identity that you hold on to, recognizing that the brain's playing this beautiful trick, and it's an amazing thing, but it does have utility. In the same way that if I say, hey, look at that guy's blue shirt, or if I say, her eyes were so blue and it reminded me of a girlfriend I had in high school, right? Blue has usefulness. We can go on and on about the usefulness of blue, right? You know, who was it that stole your cameraman? Well, it was that guy in the blue shirt, right? And so on. Likewise, you know, your name, your identity, who you are, all of that has utility. You know, Bob isn't like that. He's not like Jane. Jane's different, right? We use these distinctions as ways of communicating and bridging us by creating these experiences and these familiar textures. So I really wanted to focus on, you know, the realness of self as a perception, and that those two things are not exclusive. It can be a perception, and it can be real, and it can be real enough to build on, or to play with, or to benefit from, as opposed to saying, well, you know, blue is just a wavelength of a photon, and it really doesn't exist, and therefore I don't acknowledge color, right? Color's not a real thing, so I'm not participating in that. My ego is liberated from color, right? I from now on will refer to everything as its natural wavelength. No, yeah, that's just not going to happen, right? So I hope you've enjoyed this little chat, informal as it is, and off the cuff here, as I try to process this navigation. I'm processing basically, you know, I and we, and how do you integrate a holistic, you know, a whole unified kind of way of experiencing and addressing and talking about I and we within the realms of consciousness and identity and metaphysics and spirituality and so on, in more sophisticated ways than a wholesale abandonment of I, or of a glorification of we, and so on, because it's more nuanced than that. Anyway, peace, joy, goodwill, and I hope you're all weathering this great fall weather that we're having, and I look forward to making more videos soon.